Hello, everyone. My name's David. I'm a high-cost family case manager, and today I'm going to talk you through how to submit a provider transfer request. I will be going through the process for all provider transfers, so this part of the webinar is not high-cost family specific, and I will be covering slides 5 to 11 on the slide pack that's provided. So what is a provider transfer request? A provider transfer request is the mechanism that we use on CCMS to amend the provider from one firm to another. It is technically an amendment through the system. And how you would do it is you would go on to CCMS on the homepage once you've logged in, click the Create General Request option, and then select the Provider Transfer Request drop-down list from that list. Please be aware when you're changing, doing it as the provider transfer request, please make sure you need to select the provider transfer request, because if you select any other option, there is a manual element to this, and it's screened by our central business support team. So if you select any other inquiry type, it may not ask the correct information to do your provider transfer request, causing a delay, or it might not go to the correct team. Once you've selected the provider transfer request case inquiry type, please make sure to fill in all of the mandatory fields marked with a red asterisk. There is client name, address, date of birth, previous provider, and so on and so forth. That information is to allow us to link it to the current certificate that's there. So once that information matches up, we can then get that linked on, and then there'll be a reason for transfer and the any other information part of that is the bit that we would use to make the merits-based decision on whether or not to transfer your certificate. So it's very important that you put in the reason for transfer and any other information, as much information as you can as what's happened. Be aware though that if you're copying this information from an updated version of Word, you may get an error called the invalid characters when you try and submit this inquiry. Just be aware that it is a known issue. There's a quick guide on the slide pack which should advise on how to resolve it, but it's caused by the updated version of Word and CCMS. It doesn't recognize some characters. So getting it right first time. What we need to process provider transfer in most cases, then it's the information that we'll request as standard, is we would ask for consent from an existing member of the outgoing firm. So it's not enough that if, for example, a solicitor is changing firms, they cannot consent to the work being transferred. It would have to be an existing member who's still at the firm, or the request is born for, if there's anything to do with client dissatisfaction, we'll need evidence of that the client has followed the firm's internal complaint procedure and that they've received a response. Any other communications around that as well are more welcome, but so that we can make a decision that the relationship is broken down. Once the provider transfer request has been submitted, it is screened by our central business support team. The reason for that is the provider transfers are manual. There is a manual element to that, as I mentioned before. They will be physically allocated onto the case. So if there's any issues in the information that's provided, evidence, these can cause unnecessary delays. So getting it right first time, if you provide all the information that's requested, and also make sure the mandatory information is correct so that can be linked to the case. Otherwise, there could be a delay. If there is an urgency, please contact the customer services team. What the phone number is on the slide pack. What they can do is they will triage the issues. Normally, they advise urgency is urgent work within 48 hours. But if you don't think that this will be processed in time before an urgent deadline, then please contact them, make them aware. They can do have discretion to look to make that urgent. What they'll do is they'll flag it with the relevant team. In our case, it'd be the high cost family team. And then we would then receive that referral, triage it ourselves against other referrals for urgent work and process them accordingly. On slides 9 and 10 are illustrations of what we would see on our side of the system. So once it comes through, so when a provider transfer is received, it will go into a work queue. This will be date order, and a caseworker will process the oldest date. So it's vital, if there is an urgency, that you contact the team, because that way it can be pulled out the queue. Because as you can see from the information that's there, we only see very, very limited information before we start working on that. So we would never know of the urgency without that referral. And on slide 10 is just an illustration of what we would see. So how your information comes through to us. So it is vitally important that we get all that correct. You can check how long it takes for a provider transfer to be processed on our civil processing dates, and the link is on the slide pack as well. It does include all other work that we publish on there, and it does change regularly. So please keep checking if you've got an urgency before contacting.
Hi, I'm James Dryden, and I work as a case manager for the High Cost Family team. I'm going to go through the current process for a provider transfer and the process that we're looking to implement across multiple teams. So on slide 12, this is what you do after a standard provider transfer for a regular case. You would go to the Cases and Applications screen on CCMS, and you'd go to select the Amend Provider Details option from that. This gives you the vitally important option of assigning a contact name, aka a provider contact, who will receive all case notifications going forward. If you don't set this up, the notifications will go to an admin or a primary default contact for your firm, and they may get missed. You can also assign a supervisor to the case, and you can set your own internal case reference here. On the next slide, you can allocate cost limits following the transfer from the same available action screens in cases and clients. You can allocate cost limits between firms on the same available action screen in cases and clients. You will be directed to this page once you click it. You will see the cost limit allocation table, and it will be necessary to split the cost between the two firms. You would just enter the amount for the previous firm, hit calculate, and then hit next to finalize. The current process for provider transfers on the High Cost Family team, they are slightly different. You won't need to amend your certificate to increase the cost limitation. You'll need to set up a case plan, have it agreed by us first, and then you can submit an amendment if you need costs. After allocating costs to the previous provider, you may end up with no remaining costs. We currently don't have a set process on how we deal with the setup of the case plan task itself. Depending on the circumstances, we might use that default or the primary contact if it's the only one available to us. Or if you've had a chance to assign a provider contact, which is unlikely because we do have a short turnaround time from agreeing a transfer to setting up the case plan notification, we will use that provider contact for the case plan. So what we're proposing and what we're implementing, following the request for this very webinar, we actually identified lots of ways we can improve the service to you. There's lots of problems that come along with provider transfers that we found. Mainly, we're trying to drive down the case plan notification timeouts that are ever increasing. We want to also ensure that we've got a consistent process in place and that we have an immediate line of contact with yourself. This has the benefit of ensuring case plan notifications go to a user in your firm that you wish, or a guaranteed active user within your firm, so that they can see the case plan immediately and provide a quick response to us, or a response when one's necessary. So the standardized approach to this will reduce case plan timeouts moving forward, and we will hopefully receive a faster line of communication with yourself, with less correspondence to our customer service team or via inquiries, chasers of any kind in general. The further information request message that you receive on your provider transfer request is going to be improved considerably. We found the wording was very loose for how we request evidence of consent from the what is the previous provider. We found that consent was being provided from the new provider for their own cases to be transferred to themselves. We can't allow that, so we've worded the request much better. So we'll now ask for a provider contact, and we'll ask for that to be submitted in your message to us when you submit consent, for example. What that is that's the username you use to log into the LAA online portal on the CCMS itself. And you will want to provide us with an active user or the solicitor that's going to be undertaking the case. If you don't provide that, it's completely optional. We'll use the username that submits the provider transfer request, seeing as we know that's an active user of the firm. So a collaborative approach to change. Lovely title for a webinar slide. This will be used by other teams across High Cost Civil, not just the High Cost Family team. And we had great approval when we proposed the improved notes to send to you, and other teams want to ensure that they're doing the same thing as us. Our next step is providing training to ensure consistency across the team of High Cost Family and all other teams. I'll now hand you back to David, who will talk about the rest of the slides.
Hi everyone. I'll be covering slides 19 to 23 on the slide pack. And the area I'm covering is the High Cost Family interactions. So how does the provider transfer request actually interact with the High Cost Family team? So we piggyback off this process. It was never designed for the High Cost Family team and our work, for the work that we do. We need to make sure that we make the best decision for us as well as for you as where the case plan goes when we're putting it on the case. The problem is there are so many scenarios to this that they couldn't possibly be included in this webinar or the slide pack. There is a non-exhaustive list of scenarios and things that we might do reasoning on slides 21 and 22, and I'll talk you through them today. But the thing to bear in mind is there's not a one size fits all approach, and we would need to be sure that we're making the most appropriate decision for you and for us. If there's any scenario that you don't agree with, you don't understand, what's the thing to do is contact your case manager. Even if you had the exact same scenario, there's a good chance that if put them both to us, we could make different decisions, and that's not because of inconsistency. It's because there are things going on behind the system that may affect the decision making. So what do I mean when I'm talking about that? So going off the first example, a single counsel CCFS, who registers the case and what happens to the previous firm's costs. If it was registered by the first firm, then there would be in likelihood, there'll be two case plan tasks. So the first firm would manage their own and the second firm would manage their own. And then if there was a third firm, again, same thing. But if it was registered post the transfer, then there's likely only going to be one case plan task, and all the costs would be considered on that case plan by the second firm, and they would just take the first firm's costs from. They would have to ask them for it. Another example is the single counsel CCFS is what happens if one firm has fewer than 11 main days and firm 2 has extra days here listed. So would the first firm be eligible to claim events? Again, something your case manager should be able to discuss with you. Single counsel CCFS, what happens if firm 2 gets prior authority for King's Counsel? Again, you need to contact your case manager to see if the first firm be eligible to claim FGF. What happens if there's a group of siblings? If the contract is in place on the eldest child certificate and the transfers, what happens? So this one we could have, it depends on how many siblings, the age, and various other factors, but we may keep the case, the contract going on the case, even though you don't own it anymore. It depends on how long you've had the case, if any bills have been paid. There's a lot of factors. So the thing that we want to make sure to take into consideration on our side is have POAs or council's bills being submitted, because the last thing we want to do if we're moving case plans is recoup all those costs and cause cash flow issues for yourself. We need to make sure to know what the proceedings are. There are some fully costed ones that are have multiple areas of law. It depends on if it's CCFS or fully costed. What we do with that, how many previous firms, because if in an ideal scenario there'd be only one previous firm, but there could be 3, 4. We need to make sure that this looks and is efficient as possible. has exceptionality been identified by the new firm? Because even if the old firm hasn't got it marked, you can change the case plan type if from CCFS to fully cost or vice versa if it's classed as exceptional, but you need to make us aware as early as possible if you're taking over the case. And if the certificate is for a child, how old are they? Because if the child's about to turn 17, this may affect funding, so it may affect the decision on where we put the case plan. But please be aware that both these scenarios and the lists that I've went through are non-exhaustive. There are too many to count scenarios. And the most important thing is contact your case manager. And the way to contact them is via the VHCC inquiry. You can do it via the case plan task. And like my colleague James has said, the reason we want that line of communication there is so that we always have some way to contact you to manage the case plan. But case plan tasks are processed in about 20 working days. A VHCC inquiry is processed in about 2 working days. So there's a stark difference in the amount of time between getting a response for you. So it makes, if you can, submit a VHCC inquiry. If you're the previous firm, you can contact us via a general inquiry, but if you select the VHCC general inquiry again, that will come through to us. The same goes for council. Right, and that's the end of my section on slide 23. I'll hand you over to James now for closing thoughts on the webinar.
Yeah, just a few things to mention. One of them being, if you are submitting bulk or batch provider transfers, basically if a firm is closing down and you're taking on all the cases, please submit this through your contract manager. In the email to them, please provide a form of consent that lists all the cases and all the clients' names attached to the cases that the outgoing firm are willing to move on to your firm. And just to make you aware, we are trying to improve other areas of service. Lastly, after a provider transfer is completed, when there'll be 2 or more case plans on the same certificate, we are looking to have the same case manager work on all case plans to ensure consistency across the board and familiarity with the case narrative itself to ensure the best results for you.